Good afternoon, I'm Guy Darge and welcome to today's webinar. There's an age-old parable that businesses are like beehives. Every individual is hard at work that on its own is futile and insignificant. However, when compounded with the efforts of thousands of bees, it becomes an unstoppable force of production. The key to this model is that the strength of the hive, or any social structure for that matter, depends on every worker, no matter how lowly. A chain, after all, is only as strong as its weakest link. It's why we search for ways to make our employees happier, why we strive to know their minds. Fostering a vocal relationship between leaders and a workforce is one of the primary tenets of building a truly representative company culture. But leaders have to show they care, not just tell. Joining me here today to discuss the importance of feedback are two guests who know firsthand how vital listening to employees can be for success. Saurav Chopra, CEO of Perkbox, and Paul Devoy, CEO of Investors in People. But for anyone listening for the first time, a bit about our brand. Perkbox is the UK's leading employee experience platform. We believe that happy and engaged employees perform better and stick around for longer. With our 4 symbiotic products, Perks, Medical, Insights and Recognition, we aim to revolutionise the employee experience. Our aim, quite simply, is to help employees live better in work and in life. Now, a bit about our speakers. Saurav is the co-founder and CEO of Perkbox, Europe's fastest growing employee experience platform. Prior to founding Perkbox, Saurav spent 10 years working at global business development roles for Deloitte Consulting, Yahoo, and VC-backed startups, Byte Mobile and Amobi. Saurav holds an MBA from London Business School and a BTech in Engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology. Paul has been heading up Investors in People since 2011. Paul led the buyout of Investors in People from the UK government to a community interest company in 2017, a move that enhances the organisation's ability to deliver for employees, businesses and communities. Prior to this, Paul was head of organisational development at the Scottish Prison Service. During his time there, all 17 prisons in Scotland were awarded Investors in People accreditation. With their wealth of experience in scaling a business, making tough decisions and responding to feedback, the pair will discuss why listening to employees is critical to scaling a business. Gathering feedback, what do you ask and how do you ask it? And beyond the questions, how to act on feedback and lead by example. But before we get started, let's get to know our speakers a little bit better. Right, so we'll start at the beginning with a few warm-up questions. First one, what gets you out of bed in the morning, guys?
So for me, it's all about purpose. My career's mostly been in purpose-driven organisations, and feeling like I'm going into work every day to make a difference, that's something that ultimately has a social impact, is the thing that really motivates me to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, just to echo that, it's about creating an impact for me as well. My personal mission is to really, help create a better society than what I was born into, and the impact that I can have on it every day is what really gets me out of bed. And I'm fortunate that Perkbox is a great way to have that impact on a huge number of people, and we do it in our own special way every day.
Great. And what's the proudest you've been professionally?
So I think for me, it was successfully leading the buyout of Investors in People from the government. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to buy a business off the government. It's not the easiest exercise in the world. And the reason I'm proud about that is that now being a social enterprise and being a community interest company, everything that we do as an organisation is about making an impact and making work better for individuals, for organisations and for society overall. So I believe that now that we've got the freedom to invest in the services and the products we develop, we can really serve that community much better than we could before. And the ability to be able to do that now has been a big boost for us.
For me, the proudest moment was in October last year when Perkbox was recognized in the top 5 fastest growing technology companies by Sunday Times. The reason is that we've been going exceptionally strong for the last 4.5 years. But prior to that, as a business, we had a ton of challenges. At one point we were 3 months running out of cash, and the business went through a number of pivots. And to get there, the top 5 tech companies in the UK is something we never, if you asked me 5-6 years ago, I never actually dreamed of. So it was a very, very proud moment for myself, the team, the team who was with us 5 years ago when we were in a completely different shape. Many of them are with us. And so it was a really, really proud moment for the team, the business, to get that accomplishment, something we never thought in our dreams we would get 5 years ago.
And finally, has there ever been a time where your voice was ignored in a professional setting?
Yeah, I mean, there was one time when I worked in the government where I could see, I was a government agency I worked in, where I could see that if we had changed our strategy to something that was more sustainable and less reliant on government funding, that we could have created a more sustainable future for ourselves. And I was a kind of single voice in that mindset, and the rest of the executive team didn't see that as being the future. And I think that for me was quite a frustrating episode.
Unfortunately, when I used to work for very large corporates about 12-15 years ago, it happened, and a particular example I remember was when I was at Yahoo about 2006, and I was working with Yahoo Europe, and Yahoo HQ in California decided to acquire a company which had a lot to do with the business in Europe, contrary to the recommendations that the local team gave to the business, and and unfortunately that led to the departure of a lot of the key execs in that particular team, and that acquisition actually really slowed down a lot of things for Yahoo. So unfortunately it didn't happen, and then as a result, when I co-founded the company with another ex Yahoo colleague of mine and friend Chu, we resolved to really focus on the feedback from our teams before taking any action that actually have an impact on the business. So that was a big learning we brought into the business.
Great, so that set us up nicely to move on to talking about feedback in the workplace, but just a few housekeeping points before we do so. This webinar will have an interactive section, so please use the question function to submit questions as we go along, and we'll answer them at the end. This webinar will also be recorded and available on demand. We'll be sending the recordings within the next few days. So without further ado, let's talk about employee feedback. So the first question I'd like to pose to you both is, why do we care about employees and their opinions? Is it an exercise in reassurance, or is there genuinely insightful feedback to be had? And what happens if you don't ask the questions? Can it really make or break a business?
Yeah, so from my perspective, if you look at a company and organization, it's a system. It's a system that has, a living system that has inputs and outputs. And whenever you have a system that has inputs and outputs, you got to have constant feedback to optimize that system. Whether it's a car, or an animal, or a system like a company. And if you particularly look at the nature of the workforce right now, the workforce shift is happening pretty dramatically. In a lot of companies, 50% plus of the workforce is actually millennial, and then it's going to be about 75% in the next few years. And how the millennials operate is very, very different. It's not a 9-to-5 job. They're really looking to work for companies with a mission, a purpose, a phenomenal culture. And you cannot have a great culture in an organization unless you have a constant feedback loop, feedback that constantly improves the organization and ensures that the organization is on track and aligned with its mission and values. So, from that standpoint, absolutely critical to constantly listen to feedback.
Yeah. Yes, I would agree with that as well. I mean, I think the people at the front line of any business know best about what needs to happen to make that perform at its best. And I don't, sometimes there's an assumption that managers are these all-seeing, all-knowing beings who have the answer to everything, but actually the employees at the front line are the people who know best what the right way forward is. And in too many organisations I've worked in, there wasn't that opportunity for the employee voice to be heard, and there wasn't the regularity of feedback, and there also wasn't a belief amongst employees that that feedback would be actioned upon. So, you know, unless in any walk of life, unless you know how you're doing, you can't understand how you're going to perform better. So feedback is a gift, and every organisation should be focusing on it. But it does rely on the leaders in the organisation to have a high degree of emotional intelligence, where that they don't get defensive when they get that feedback and don't go into justification mode, that they actually think, right, well, this is a gift. How do I work with this to make the organisation perform better for the organisation's sake, but also for the employees?
Brilliant. So, you know, from what both of you said there, there's this idea that, you know, your employees are like the, you know, they're your sensory output, really. That's how you know what's going on in the market. Just from examples in your own companies, have there been any decisions? Have you had any feedback that have formed decisions that have, you know, brought about real structural change?
Yes, you know, from our standpoint, you know, we're an organization that focuses very heavily on constant learning and improvement. So you know, we as an exec team started a learning initiative. We, you know, gave all the team members and employees learning budgets and put in place certain initiatives. And you know, we thought that you know, we're doing a great job in terms of getting our team to, you know, really amp up their learning, and then we started looking at really in detail some of the feedback that we were getting on our Puckbox Insights, which is our feedback tool, which we use obviously, you know, heavily internally, and consistently the feedback that we're getting is that, hey, you know, we're not getting learning opportunities. So there was like a real kind of you know, that really kind of, we took a step back and then really went into a lot more detail, the learning specific surveys, and try to understand what was happening. On the one hand, you know, we thought we're doing a great job and doing all these initiatives, and on the other hand, we're getting constant feedback, but hey, it's not working. So we took a step back, we went even deeper, more detailed surveys, and then, you know, collected a lot of feedback on what is it that the team really wants, and then went back out and created a new set of initiatives which were much more aligned with what our team wanted. So, and that really, we saw an improvement in terms of the feedback on the learning opportunities and how people were learning inside the organization. So that was a big learning and big you know, improvement in what we used to do before and after the feedback that we received.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, when we left government, we were a startup running a mature business. So Investment People been around for 28 years, and we were a startup business with no systems, no processes. And really trying to bind the cultures together from the people we were bringing in from the more commercial world, and people from startups, people who'd come from government, and people who'd come from our franchise partners, all coming with different perspectives. And I think for us, they say, but if you assume anything, it makes an ass of you and me. And there was I naively assumed that once we got the purpose and everything right, that everyone would just gel behind that. But people are coming with lots of different perspectives. So we've had to evolve what we've been trying to do over time so that we find that unifying gel that holds the culture together, that is meaningful for people who are coming from lots of different backgrounds. And for us, 2 years in, that is very much still a work in progress. And it's just your point, you get feedback, you make an adjustment, but that might only take you part of the way there. In fact, it might take you in the wrong direction. Unless you're getting constant feedback on what the changes that you're making. You can't course correct to really understand whether it's making the impact that you want. So for me, understanding what the employees' views are and being prepared to pivot and being prepared to admit that you made that change and you got that wrong and you're prepared to go in a different direction. That again also shows that you're authentic about the fact that you want to engage.
In both of the sort of examples you've just given, sounds like there was an expectation that things were fine and the feedback revealed something that was sort of hidden in a way. Do you think that one of the primary uses of feedback is to highlight these blind spots?
Yeah, I think at a superficial level, staff surveys can be quite a blunt and crude tool. What you need to get off the back of that is real insight and really strong data that helps you understand the problem at different levels. And I think historically staff surveys have been too much of a blunt tool, which can give you false pictures depending on how you cut the data, and then can then initiate actions that actually could potentially make the problem worse rather than the problem better. So if you're getting feedback, you need to invest in getting proper insight rather than just crude staff surveys. And again, that needs the commitment of management to be prepared to really want to dig into a problem and be prepared to accept what might come back, as it can often be very uncomfortable. And certainly in my experience, some of the feedback we've had has been uncomfortable, but you have to roll with it, absorb it, and then try and do something authentic about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the it's the feedback is great, and you can take it at face value. In some cases, it's pretty clear and obvious what the feedback is. However, a lot of cases, I think it's really, really important to kind of peel the layers. And a good tool can help you do that, where you can really help look at the correlation between certain aspects of feedback that you're getting. But it's really, really important to peel the layers and not just go at face value and really understand the real problem. Because as Paul said, you can do the wrong. You can take the feedback at face value, take the wrong action, which complicates things even further. So I think we don't see a lot of companies necessarily do that. That actually peel the layers and look at what the real problem is, and that's something that we do, pretty carefully here at Perksbox, and our leadership teams do that. So, but obviously, if feedback is negative, that's actually good. As you said earlier, feedback is a gift. You don't want negative feedback to be a gift that keeps on giving, but you want negative feedback definitely. That means you've got things to learn from. You have people who are passionate about the organization. In some cases, would really want to express their opinions. So I think negative feedback, it needs to be interpreted in the right way, but it needs to because you got to peel the layers, understand what people are really saying, and then take the right action so that those negative elements actually, the next time you do the survey of a pulse survey around, you actually transform that into some positive feedback from your teams.
And I think it means you also have to do work on your management teams at all levels as well, because being criticised is not an easy thing for any human being to accept. No one likes it, and you have to be able to absorb that feedback in a positive way, rather than what sometimes you get with managers is that they get defensive and start post-rationalising why it is like that and develop their own narrative why the feedback might be wrong or why it's not based on their experience, and they use anecdotes to justify why the feedback is wrong. So there has to be work done with managers in terms of how they respond to it, and not in a defensive way. And I think sometimes there's pressures on HR departments that the employee engagement score can only ever go up. And again, that can quite often be quite a crude tool if the motivation is to get the score up rather than really understand what the problems are and put the solutions in place to address them.
Yeah, and what you said earlier about the emotional intelligence on part of the leadership is actually a key element of that, because you don't necessarily have it everywhere, and part of the job for the HR team, for the exec team, the management, the CEO, the founder is to be almost act as a coach to drive that emotional intelligence, or help build that emotional intelligence, because it's really, really critical. And people can get defensive about negative feedback very, very quickly. People can get competitive amongst different scores and different teams, and that's one thing definitely to avoid. The feedback is a learning tool, to help the organizations become better and better and better, so that everybody can be happy and productive and deliver the result that the employees want to deliver, the team wants to deliver, and the business expects as well.
And one of the things I've noticed we've got over 7,000 organisations across 50 companies that work with investors and people, and we see them over a long. So some organisations have been with us for like 20 years, and organisations, they're an organism, and things go up and down. It's never a straight line. It's never flat, and it's never straight down. It's never always straight up. Things move and change, but where there's that overall commitment to engaging employees, and the management have the appetite to deal with the downs and not just be constantly looking for things to go up all the time, those organisations, our research shows that they perform more sustainably over the long run than organisations who can do a quick fix and get a spike up the way and expect it just to stay like that. And that isn't life, and that isn't the way that organisations flow over the longer term.
Brilliant, really unpacked it there. So we'll move on to a sort of more practical question, which is getting the most out of your employee and your employee feedback can depend on the type of questions you ask and how you ask them. In both of your experiences, what is the best way to ask your questions, and how has this changed in both of your businesses over time?
Yeah, so for us, we've grown pretty rapidly over the last few years. So obviously the way we get feedback has changed. So when we were close to about 300 people now. So we obviously have a system of asking, tool. We obviously use our own PerkBox Insights tool. We had to ask questions, gather the feedback, do the analysis, and then act upon the feedback and share with the business the feedback that you've acted upon. And then obviously the next round of feedback, we hope to see better results or feedback on what we've acted upon and how things have improved. Obviously back in the days when we were about 10 or 15, then it was more informal method. At our team drinks or our meetings, we always asked how things are going and what we could do better, and what could management do better to make the lives of the team a lot easier, help them succeed. So obviously with scale, it changes. When you become larger to a certain stage, it becomes a lot more important to make it data driven, to have the right frequency, to ask the right questions. And in terms of having the right questions, we have a framework that we follow, which covers certain areas around learning, teamwork, communication, and so on and so forth. And then we measure the results, how the results are improving, plus also get tangible, actionable feedback and comments, from the employees. And obviously, we use our own tool pretty heavily, and that helps us obviously optimize and improve the tool. And we have hundreds of our customers actually using this tool as well. So that's our method.
Yeah, but I think it's very context specific. So the research that we did a few years ago with CIPD showed that generally a company doesn't have professional HR till they get to sort of 60 to 80 employees. And as you say, the smaller you are, the more you can go down the pub, apply people who drink. Quite often they tell you the truth then. And smaller groups, you can get that more organic feedback. But quite often organisations hit a glass ceiling round about when they get to 20 to 30 employees, and then start to need more formal structures then to actually get that feedback. So for us, the way that we do it is, because we're a community interest company, we've developed a free tool for small businesses called Jumpstart, which is to get them to start thinking about people management. Because when you're a startup, you're maybe an engineer or you've got some sort of domain knowledge. People management is probably quite far down your list of competencies. So our mission is to try and make work better for everyone. And most people work in small companies now. The number of people who work in large companies is diminishing every year. I think people working in small companies is now more than 50% of the workforce. So what we're trying to do is to create the opportunity for particularly very small businesses to start using these approaches and getting feedback and improvement completely for free, so that it's built in as the organisation starts, and it becomes part of its DNA as it grows and gets more sophisticated. And then get more sophisticated tools the more sophisticated the organisation is. So I think anyone, depending people that are on the line, I think you need to think about what the context you're in at the moment. If you've only got 10, 15 employees, going for something very big and sophisticated probably won't probably is a bit of a waste of money, to be honest. And it's being clear about what it is you want to know and what tool works best for you.
So, we sort of touched on this on the last point, but, once you've collected your feedback, there's of course going to be an element of negative comments, negative feedback. And sometimes that can be maybe hard to stomach, but what do you do once you've received this negative feedback? How do you go about handling it?
Yeah, so as we touched upon earlier, I think the the negative feedback is really, really good for the business. So first, I think it's really important for management and the leaders to understand that to really take it in the right spirit. And I think it's important to kind of peel the layers and understand what is that feedback really telling us? What is the underlying sentiment? What is the underlying problem? And then really, of course, it boils down to seeing that if that is a problem that's recurring across different aspects of feedback that you have received as a consistent pattern, and it's talking about a much deeper problem. And then I think it's really, really important for the business and the leaders to understand that, act upon that, and hopefully that drives the change that the employees or the business or the team wants to see.
Yeah, I think I heard someone say the other day that people don't have survey feedback or survey fatigue. People talk about survey fatigue. They have lack of action fatigue. Yeah, and if they feel like the organisation is just ticking a box, because there's quite a lot of compliance rules now about company reporting, around about employee engagement, employee feedback. But what employees really want to see is action. So if you can demonstrate that your leadership team is authentically interested in what employees are saying, and you're going to really action upon it and be transparent about the actions that are taking place and how well those actions have progressed, then that builds trust and will also help build engagement because they can see the commitments there.
Excellent. So that brings us on very nicely to the third sort of part of this, which is it's easy to ask questions, but it's how you act on the answers that's important. So how do we go about actioning feedback? What are the steps you need to take?
So the different steps once you have the feedback in place. I think one of the most important things is to really understand the feedback. So it's important to really understand from an analytical standpoint, look at the data. What is it really telling you? Are there any, again, as I said earlier, underlying signals, sentiment? And once you have that, the next step is really around making it visible and transparent. So for an organization, first of all, if an organization truly embraces the spirit of getting employee feedback and then making changes and actioning upon that feedback, you're already signaling that you have transparency inside the organization. So it's really, really important that once you have that feedback and you've analyzed it, that the results and the data becomes transparent to the relevant teams, to the relevant leaders. And once it's transparent, it becomes it's essential that it becomes a part of the weekly discussion that the teams have. So for us, for example, at our exec team meetings, which we had, training meetings we have every week with the top leaders in the business, one of the most important things, first item on the list, is really around the Bud Box insights and the feedback that we're getting from the team. And we encourage our leadership team as well in their weekly meeting to touch upon those, the feedback that they have been getting on a weekly basis. And so that's how we make it a part of the rhythm of the business to actually, just like we analyze the numbers, just like we analyze the performance, you make it a rhythm of the business to reanalyze, what the employee are saying about the business and getting the feedback. And then once you have that and you act upon the feedback, we publish in our communication proactively, and we have different types of communication in the business. We have our all hands that we do fortnightly, which is called Let's Talk. We have our we use in our ongoing communication with the business. We will share what is the feedback we have received and what we're doing to act upon that feedback. So first is about getting the data, analyzing it properly, sharing it, making it visible, making it part of the rhythm of the business, and then sharing with the teams what we have done to act upon the feedback.
Yeah, I would strongly agree with all those points. I think I would summarize it by saying two things. There has to be transparency and accountability. Yeah, transparency about the feedback and transparency about the accountability and what the organisation is going to do as a result. Transparency about the action plan that's taking place and transparency about where the accountability sits. And then following that, certainly the way that we do in our organisation, I think if you can demonstrate that the people metrics are as important as the other metrics. So we have 5 headline KPIs, and the people KPI in terms of bonus has as much of a weighting as the financial KPI. Yeah, and so for me, that's another way of demonstrating that to the employees, it's not just about the bottom line. That the employee feedback is often a very powerful leading indicator, and the financials is a lagging indicator. And if the employee numbers are going in the right direction, the financial numbers will probably start to follow at the same time. So that for me is really important, and I really support what Sourav said about it becoming a part of the rhythm of the organisation in terms of how you analyse those people metrics to the same degree that the financials get analysed. And I think in too many organisations that doesn't happen.
So, following up on that, and this is, I think, what a lot of people will be interested to hear on this front, but as a CEO, how do you lead by example in this context? How do you show your employees that, personally and from a sort of C-suite perspective, you are, week on week listening to this feedback, trying to make the changes? Because of course, this is going on behind the scenes. This is stuff that not everyone will see on a day-to-day basis. How do you sort of convey? How do you show that that's going on?
So the way that I do it is that we have a monthly all-team meeting, and every quarter we, and I think it depends on the kind of cycle of your business, but our business works more on a kind of quarterly cycle, and all the KPIs are transparent about how we're doing, and the people KPI has as much weight as the financial KPI. So I report back to the team in terms of how we've done against them all and how we're progressing against them all. And the people element has as much weight and emphasis as the financial element does. And I think what that does is signal to the employees that that's where you prioritise things, and that what you're interested in is the people KPI as much as anything else. So for me, that's the way that I do it.
Yeah. So for me, we at our all hands, which is fortnightly, what is called Let's Talk sessions. We talk about the feedback we receive, the action items we have taken to act upon that feedback. So that's at a company-wide level. At a personal level, I think what is really, really important is that as a CEO or leader in a business, you got to really live the values and mission of the business. And for us, one of the key values is zero fear. Which means that we want really encourage our employees and teams to demonstrate transparency, but also expect transparency and ask the tough questions. So for me, when I'm in one-on-one interactions, I do proactively try to encourage people to disagree and express their opinion openly, which doesn't really happen, unfortunately, as organizations become larger and larger. So that's one of the key things that I do. I openly ask for feedback from my teams, from people who report to me, if I'm actually helping them do their job better, or am I making things a bit more difficult for them. So I think it's having that open dialogue, being really, really transparent, and asking for feedback on what you can do better as a CEO or leader in an organization. We as leaders and CEOs are constantly learning ourselves every day, and being transparent about it and asking your teams and how do your job better and how you can help them better is a part of the stuff that I do every day to become very open and transparent.
Just to follow up on that a little bit more, as a company grows, your position as a CEO must change to a certain extent. So you're not Sourav, and you're not Paul anymore. You're the CEO, and people have a level of distance that people have between you. How do you, is there anything that you can do to, you know, make yourself approachable in that way, and make feedback, you know, people giving you feedback personally easier, because sometimes that can be quite a scary thing for particularly low level employees?
Yeah. Well, I've only become a CEO for the first time 2 years ago. So, I mean, for me personally, that was a massive adjustment, going from being head of something to being the CEO of a company, and a massive learning curve. So I think for me, I was transparent about how much I was learning on the job, and I think I'm a big fan of Brené Brown, and I don't know if if you've watched Netflix, she's got a brilliant talk on Netflix, and she talks about vulnerability and demonstrating that you are vulnerable as a leader, and that you are on a learning journey yourself, and that you get things wrong and you make mistakes, and not trying to act like this all-seeing, all-knowing being that everybody, you know, whatever comes out of your mouth is gospel and has to be the truth, that you're a fallible human being the same as everybody else. If you can demonstrate that and evoke that, then people will connect with you more on a human level and feel open to share the things that they don't feel is working right, or the things that they don't feel in themselves that's going as well as it could be. So I think it's very much a cultural thing, but it has to come from the top. And I think the CEO has a big role to play in terms of the way that they operate and behave, and showing that humility and that vulnerability themselves. Then I think people are more open to talking to you openly about how they feel about stuff.
Yeah, I think some great points there on, you know, obviously the humility and being vulnerable, and you know, what's really important is that as the organization becomes larger, you know, it is really important for the CEO or other leaders in the business to, you know, to kind of double down the effort to bridge the relationship they have with you know, the employees in the business, especially the ones who join much later. You know, your first 50 employees, you probably know everybody by name. You've got our first 100, you've got, you know, had drinks for them. But when you get, you know, 150, 200, 300, you know, the CEO becomes a title, and you're absolutely right, you know. But you as a leader have not changed or evolved materially in your and how you look at people, how you engage with people necessarily. So it's really important to, you know, to double down the effort to bridge that relationship with the latest joiners in the business, the new joiners in the business. And what I try to do is, obviously, you know, from my standpoint, is to demonstrate that I'm constantly learning, that you know, I'm doing things that align the values of the organization. For example, you know, one of our key values is, you know, test to try to get it done. So when I would come up, you know, when I do come up with an idea, it's really, I kind of position it as, hey, I don't know if it's going to work or not. But obviously, you know, one of our key values is just test to try to get it done. So, you know, it's up to you how you want to implement it, or if you want to implement it, but I have no clue whether it's going to work or not. And I do proactively talk about ideas, suggestions, and failures that I've had in the past. So just to make, you know, just to obviously signal that it's okay to fail. That's actually, it's really important to fail and make mistakes and learn from it. But the key is the learning. So I'll proactively talk about my failures, I'll proactively talk about what I've learned from those failures and what we have learned from those failures as a business. So it's really about being very humble, trying to demonstrate you're constantly learning, and to show that vulnerability, as you said earlier.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, both Saurav and Paul. Some really interesting insights there, and I really liked, you know, the finishing touches on humility and vulnerability, and still being a person at the end of the day. I think that's a really good message to finish on. We've had a few questions from the audience that we'll address in just a moment. What Saurav and Paul have highlighted is that collecting and acting on feedback isn't a one-off task, but a continuous project that requires not only a radical mindset, but a completely new infrastructure for dealing with all this new data. This isn't a proposition that most businesses will take lightly. It's a big step and a little daunting to consider alongside the million other issues needing addressed. The same was true at Perkbox. That's why we developed a product that could tackle the overload and simplify the results. Designed as an agile pulse survey tool, Perkbox Insights enables HR to gather and act on feedback in a way that improves both company culture and performance. By sending short, intuitive surveys on a regular basis, Insights improves response rates while also analyzing the data for you. Alongside an overall engagement score, users can easily identify their weak spots by checking their results on a real-time dashboard. The tool also allows you to benchmark how different areas of your company are performing against the 10 drivers of engagement with innovative heat mapping technology. So, if you're ready to start improving your employee satisfaction or would like to find out more, book a call with one of our engagement experts today. Back to Saurav and Paul. We've had a few questions, so let's move on to the audience Q&A. Okay, so go. Why do you think companies struggle so much with acting on feedback? Quite a general one first.
It's hard. It's not easy. And you know, it may deliver you a curveball that you never saw coming, and therefore you may have to change plans you've already got in place. You may have to pivot into a different direction. It may not necessarily be consensus amongst the exec team about whether they actually agree with the feedback. So you know, it involves a lot of thought and effort and work. But like anything in life, if you engage with it, and even though it's hard, the hard yards will deliver fantastic results in the long run. And I think perhaps there's a Rubicon that people have to cross in terms of engaging with it and doing something about it that acts as a barrier before they see the benefits of it. And that's why I think some people don't take it as far as they should.
Yeah, I think the key reason, in my opinion, why companies find it hard to act on feedback is that, you know, if you look at the traditional model of, you know, leadership and, you know, what team, you know, HR or L&D teams spend time on, it is not really the emotional intelligence of their leaders. I think if it's a lot around their, you know, technical skills and capabilities, business skills and capabilities and their IQs, but not the EQ of the leaders and the teams. I think once that is in place, where you have teams and leaders who really, you know, are emotionally intelligent, then the understanding is very clear of why feedback is important. When you know why it's important, how it's going to improve your business, you will act upon it as a, you know, as a right leader in the business. So I think, in my opinion, you know, a lot of focus should go into the EQ of leaders and team EQ, and that will, at a more fundamental level, make it easier to act on feedback.
I think that's a really powerful point. And the Chartered Management Institute did some research a few years ago, and I think there's some like 2.5 million accidental managers in the UK. So that's people who have been promoted into a management position, but haven't had any training or development to prepare them for that. So we have a paradigm, I think particularly in this country, that if you're a fantastic nurse or a fantastic salesperson, or any kind of occupation, once you get up to a certain level, the next progression is for you to then manage people. You may be completely unsuited for that role, but if you want to progress, you don't really have any option other than to manage people. So we don't filter out the people who are just genetically not programmed to do it, and we then don't create the career path for them to go down a technical discipline route that they can excel at. And B, the people who have got the capacity to build the capability, we don't provide them with the support before they move into a management role, and they're learning on the job and getting things wrong. So when I do talks, I often ask managers to tell me what they describe themselves as when they go to a dinner party. And generally they'll say engineer or nurse or salesperson or whatever. And then I ask them, as a senior leader, how much of their day requires the technical knowledge. And generally they say 5–10%. The 90% is dealing with people. Now, they've maybe trained for 7 years to be an engineer or 4 years to be a nurse or whatever, and yet 90% of the job that they do now at a really high strategic important level, they've had virtually no training or support to do it. And I think that misbalance has a big impact on the effectiveness of organisations, and we need to invest much more in our leaders and our managers to prepare them for that role before they'll be able to act on feedback in a meaningful way, because in a lot of situations they they don't know how to respond to it and they don't know what to do. So,
next question. To create a feedback culture, do you think the push should be on people asking for or people giving feedback?
both, I would say. I think it has to work both ways. So, you know, I think me as a leader, I want feedback as well on how I perform, and people who work for me want feedback on how they're performing. Everybody wants feedback, so it's a circular thing. And unless it's a circular thing, it can't just be one way. It needs to work. So people need to ask for it. If you're not getting feedback, you should ask for it. And I think for me, the old appraisal systems that most organisations run actually run counter to that. So saving everything up for like a 6-monthly review if you're lucky, or an annual review, and delivering 12 months of feedback in one session, and someone's got to absorb. On the 28th of March last year, you did X, Y, and Z. It was really good. I was like, I can't even remember that. You know, feedback has to be in the moment, and it has to be authentic and meaningful and specific. And too many organisations create systems that actually run counter to that. So Investors in People, we do not have annual appraisals anymore. We have 6 weekly feedback sessions, which is both feedback from the manager to the staff member and back the other way, and feedback across the organisation. So soliciting feedback from colleagues as well. So the individual gets a rounded picture of how they're doing, and it's in the moment rather than it being saved up over a longer period of time. It actually, I think, is counterproductive.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, and kind of echo what we said earlier around transparency and accountability. It needs to happen both ways. It's not just a one-way street, and again, that's in our organization, we have a key value, zero fear, and when we talk about zero fear, we do share with our teams, look, it's both ways. You can say to us what we want, but equally we'll also give you open and honest feedback that will make you more successful in your role. And I think, as Paul said, a lot of organizations have this annual cycle or 6-monthly cycle, and by the time it's you get around to implement the feedback, you've already demotivated a lot of people who are who have that fatigue of their feedback not being acted upon. So absolutely agree, it needs to be done in the moment. In fact, every interaction you as a manager have with your team member is an opportunity to have two-way feedback, right? And from any team meeting you have, a one-on-one session, check-in session you have, we do a lot of, our managers do weekly or fortnightly check-in sessions. That's an opportunity to have feedback, one-on-one feedback, both ways. The manager needs to know if they're helping their team get better in their roles and helping them accomplish their roles. So it has to be both ways. It has to be frequent, in my opinion.
Okay, next one. How can we give people the confidence to be able to understand, 1, how they are actually feeling and deciphering the why, and 2, how to communicate that?
Wow. Start with, I love the premise of that question, because you should always start with why. And setting up the organisation, being clear about your purpose, be clear about your why, being clear about the why of feedback. I'm just processing that as I've asked a question. I think that's a really powerful philosophical question. Yeah. So what is the point of feedback? The point of feedback is for you to become aware of something that you possibly otherwise aren't, and to take action on it that you otherwise wouldn't do, whether it be an individual level or an organizational level. So I think people need to understand the intent behind the feedback and feel that it's delivered with good intent, and it's about helping someone or an organization grow and develop, and everyone being clear that it comes from a basis of trust. Then I think it's a gift and something that everyone can engage with.
Yeah, it is definitely a very, very deep question. I think if you take a step back, right, for an employee or a team member to have that confidence that they can give the right feedback, ask the right questions, and truly have an impact on organization, I think the organization, the employee needs to actually trust that the organization is a purpose-driven organization. They need to understand the mission of the business, and be aligned with the mission of the business and the values of the business. Now the challenge is that a lot of organizations sometimes just pay lip service to company mission and values. It becomes a checklist exercise. There's some mission statements that are paragraphs and paragraphs that probably the employees don't know what the mission statement is about.
Yeah.
And I think it takes, if you, at the top level, if you are a mission-driven organization, you're a purpose-driven organization, have a mission, have values, and you're getting people in who are aligned with the mission, i.e. their personal mission is aligned with your company's mission, their values are aligned with your values, that is the first step of giving that confidence, because then they can be, if they believe in it, obviously, they need to believe and trust in it, and that's the first step. And obviously at a more kind of tactical level, it's really incumbent upon the organization and the leaders of the organization to constantly demonstrate they are listening to feedback and they're acting upon that feedback. Because once you close the loop, once you demonstrate you're listening by acting upon that feedback, that builds trust and confidence amongst people to give you more feedback and ask more questions. But at top level, it's inherently that confidence only come if there's alignment in the values and mission of the organization with the employees. They need to believe in it.
Great. Okay, so how do you empower people to take accountability so it change doesn't become top down only?
I think that's another really good question. Again, that goes back to the point about the capability of your line managers. So your line managers have to feel like they have the autonomy to actually implement change at the local level, as long as it's in line with the overall framework of the values of the organisation. But for me, the key to unlocking that is about empowering your first line managers. That's your real agents of change. They're the ones. So there was a brilliant book called First Break All the Rules that was based on, I think it was, I'm trying to remember what survey company it was, but it was based on a huge survey. I was maybe about 20-year-old now, but the findings of that was the key to success in organisations was unlocking the potential of the first line managers. And if you can do that, and they feel that they've got the autonomy and they've got the skills to act, that's what will deliver. That was what will deliver it for you. That, if I was to say one thing, that would be it.
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, to empower the line managers and the people at the front line is really what it's all about. They need the relevant level of, the right level of coaching for that as well. So so they can confidently make the decisions. We help our people at our front line make those decisions and empower them by using what we call an OKR system. So we have an objectives and key results system. And for us, it's about the top line OKRs that the business needs to deliver, the teams need to deliver, whether it's from a financial standpoint or a people standpoint. And as long as we are getting there towards that OKR, the line managers and the people at the front line can find the relevant path to get there. So it's not, we don't get into the granular details of what needs to be done. We get into the details of where we need to get to, and then that's how we empower our line managers, our leaders, our frontline staff. And I think the second thing which is really important is that there's a functional hierarchy, there's an organizational hierarchy in most companies, but there's a different kind of a network or influencer network that every company operates. All right, so you may not be a part of a certain functional hierarchy, but you're part of a network inside a company that is passionate about the company, or there's an influencer network running inside the company. So what we try to do is we really try to empower these kind of influencers inside a company as well. So we have a concept of culture guardians that we use inside Perkbox, where there's no kind of formal hierarchy, but there's a set of people who are really uber passionate about the culture, the values, and the mission of the organization, and they've got a different level of initiatives that they're working on, and they're empowered. So there's a functional hierarchy, and there's some kind of other influencer network in your organization, and I think it's important for organizations to recognize both and empower people at both levels at a functional level, but also at a kind of more informal influence and network operating inside your company level?
This is a great question, actually. It's a bit of a mammoth. When you've decided to implement a business change from feedback, how does this get implemented? Is it added to a backlog managed by continuous improvements managers? How do you ensure it doesn't get lost?
I think it comes back to the point that I made earlier. It's about transparency and accountability. So it needs to be really transparent and prioritised, for me, certainly in our organisation, prioritised alongside the financial KPIs. And it needs to be clear where the accountability lies, and it also needs to be clear about how those actions are going to be reported on to demonstrate progress, and that's going to be transparent and visible as well. And that, for me, is the key to it.
Yeah. So any business change that we decide to implement are based on the feedback. First of all, obviously we spend a great amount of time, depending on the type of change and the effect the change may have, to really analyze the implications across the whole business, financial implications, people implications, process implications, operational implications. And once we've decided that, it really needs to get into the rhythm of our business, and the rhythm of our business and how we measure that rhythm and at what pace that rhythm is going is through a system of what we call OKRs, which is objectives and key results. And different companies have different systems. Some companies use KPIs or different KPI forms. Our form is using this OKR system. So once we decide to implement a change, it needs to be baked into the OKRs that we have across the business, across different teams. And we really double down on making sure there's alignment across different teams when it comes to these OKRs and how this particular business change will be implemented across those teams. Because the worst thing you can do is affect one part of the organization, give them a certain OKRs or KPIs to implement that change, and then that causes a negative impact on the other side of the organization. So we really spend a lot of time making sure that alignment of business change and the impact of the business change is considered across the whole business.
Well, I'm afraid we're out of time there. There's a few more questions, but unfortunately that's our lot. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Saurav and Paul, for some unparalleled insights. That's it from us. Goodbye and have a great afternoon, everyone.